Today, I want to talk about something that I know many of you can relate to right now. For years, you've been getting an annual lake report that tells you everything looks fine on the surface, but invasive weeds just keep on reappearing, even though you're nuking the lake with biocidal chemicals to kill them. Or out of nowhere, a toxic algae bloom shuts your beach or lake down. Because many lakes are ticking time bombs, loaded with problems no one notices until it's too late. Or maybe your lake management plan involves treatments like Algaecides, Herbicides, or alum, and you found that despite your best efforts, the same problems keep coming back year after year, and the cost of those treatments keeps going up year after year. It's frustrating and it's exhausting. It can make you feel like you're stuck on a merry-go-round that you just can't escape from. You're not alone. In 2022, the Government Accountability Office released a report that echoed what so many people have been subconsciously realizing. After decades of research and millions of dollars spent on studying the symptoms of lake decline, we're still stuck in the same place, treating the symptoms instead of getting to the root of the problem. That's exactly why we're here today, because so many communities are stuck on the same frustrating treadmill, and they deserve clear, honest answers that lead to real results. You need to look below the surface and understand what's really happening in your lake rather than just what's visible on your lake. I'm Dave Shackleton, and these Simplify the Science videos will help you cut through the confusion of those lake reports, understand what the Government Accountability Office highlighted in its landmark report about why current practices are failing us, and show you how to measure the right data to measure what matters, so you can make better decisions that will save your lake and your lake lifestyle. We explained the 3 root causes that have to be tackled: hypoxia, sediment nutrient recycling, restoring the balance of phytoplankton in the food web. We'll be doing a separate video on measuring what matters for each. In this one, we're going to focus on hypoxia, what it is, how it happens, why it matters, how to measure it, and what you need to see to be sure hypoxia has been eliminated from your lake. I'll also explain how you could be being tricked into spending good money on making hypoxia worse and actually lighting the fuse on the time bomb at the bottom of your lake without even realizing it. And at the end, I'll tell you about the dangerous shift we've noted at the bottom of lakes across the country that could be pushing thousands of them into long-term failure. So let's start by talking about hypoxia and why it's such a serious threat to your lake's health. The EPA defines hypoxia to be when dissolved oxygen levels in the water drop below 2.5 milligrams per litre. But hypoxia is more than just a technical definition. Oxygen's the lifeblood of your lake. Without it, every part of the aquatic ecosystem that naturally maintains a healthy lake begins to collapse. Below 3 milligrams a litre, fish start to be stressed. The warning signs are excessive algae blooms and invasive weeds. They grow when conditions are right, then die and sink to the bottom, where they decompose. That decomposition uses up oxygen, especially in the deeper, colder parts of the lake, creating hypoxia. Because cold water is denser than warmer water, and hypoxic water is denser than oxygenated water, it behaves like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Gravity pulls it to the bottom, holding and trapping it beneath the warmer layers, locking in the problem where no one can see it. Over time, that bottom layer becomes permanently hypoxic and slowly expands upwards as more organic matter settles and decays, extending the dead zone further and further up into the lake. From the surface, it might look like everything is fine, but beneath, your lake is silently suffocating. In a healthy lake, algae aren't a nuisance. They're an essential part of the ecosystem. They feed zooplankton, which in turn feed fish. Those fish then become food for birds, reptiles, and mammals. That's the food web, and it's what clears nutrients from your lake and keeps your lake balanced. Every link in that nutrient clearing food chain depends on oxygen. When oxygen levels drop, zooplankton populations start to collapse. Without them, algae grow unchecked, and fish struggle to find both oxygen and food. It creates a vicious feedback loop that accelerates the collapse of the entire food web. And the problems don't stop there. When the upper layers of the sediment become hypoxic, benthic organisms, those tiny creatures at the bottom of the lake that consume organic muck, begin to die off. So instead of being removed by the food web, nutrients get stuck in a perpetual recycling loop, fueling more algae, which die, sink, and decay, using up more oxygen and worsening the problem. But there's more to it than that. The change in benthic oxygenation also disrupts the natural processes that keep nutrients locked in the sediment, causing them to be actively recycled back into the water instead. You see, phosphorus is less soluble in oxygenated water, but more soluble in hypoxic water. So dissolved phosphorus levels remain high at the bottom when it's released from the sediment. Here's a chart to explain it. The depth is along the bottom here, and dissolved oxygen levels are on the vertical axis. So at the surface, dissolved oxygen levels are good. But as you go deeper, dissolved oxygen levels plummet and stay like that all the way to the bottom. If you measure phosphorus or ammonia levels, you'll see the exact opposite. Near the surface, where dissolved oxygen levels are above 5 milligrams a litre, you won't be able to detect much at all. But as dissolved oxygen drops, both phosphorus and ammonia levels rise and stay high all the way to the bottom. So phosphorus that should have stayed locked away in the sediment now escapes back into the water. Ammonia levels also rise for the same reason. And ammonia is toxic to fish and provides a source of nutrient that cyanobacteria can use. Why is that important? Unlike beneficial algae that can only float at the surface, cyanobacteria have a unique ability. They can control their buoyancy. That allows them to dive deep to access the nutrients from the sediment and then rise back up to the surface to get the sunlight they need to bloom. That's one of the competitive advantages they use to outcompete beneficial algae season after season. Eventually, that leads to toxic blooms that can shut down your lake entirely, closing beaches, cancelling summer weekends, and turning what should be a safe, beautiful place into a health risk for people and pets alike. That's why tracking the profile of phytoplankton in detail gives you such valuable insight into your lake's condition. But too few lake management plans do that in sufficient detail. They just measure chlorophyll A. But we'll cover that in another video. There's an even deeper issue at play here, one that often gets overlooked. Over the past several decades, as populations have grown and urban development has expanded, our lakes have been receiving more and more nutrient inflows. These nutrients come from a variety of sources: farm runoff, leaking septic systems, storm drains, wastewater treatment discharges, just to name a few. When those nutrients enter a lake, they're captured by algae and transformed into biomass. Because there's too much algae for the food web to consume, the excess dies off, sinks, adds to the detritus and muck at the bottom. And once it has depleted oxygen and decomposed, that biomass is converted back into nutrient stockpile rich in phosphorus and nitrogen. All of that extra phosphorus and nitrogen acts as fertilizer for invasive weeds and algae. The algae bloom, the food web can't keep up, the excess algae die and sink to the bottom, where they decompose again. That's why so many lakes have developed a sediment nutrient stockpile at the bottom, constantly sucking oxygen out of the water as it decomposes. So your lake can now drive its own decline from the inside, independent of nutrient inflows from the watershed. Even if you manage to block off every bit of nutrient runoff from outside the lake, It has its own self-sustaining nutrient supply that keeps fueling its own problems. So while reducing nutrient inflows is important, it's not the answer. With all of that in mind, it's easy to see how so many lake management plans are designed to go wrong. They see weeds, they spray them with herbicides. They see algae, algaecides. So is it really treatment or just a trick? It's like a magician's sleight of hand. The problem seems to vanish before your eyes. The weeds will, the algae clears. Amazement, applause all round. But it's misdirection. The magician keeps your eyes trained on the surface, so you're fooled by his clever trick, keeping your attention focused on the surface that suddenly looks better, but the real damage happens out of sight on the bottom, where the dead biomass settles, oxygen is stripped away, and a new bloom is already being fed. It's not restoration, it's illusion. And unless you break the cycle, the final trick is always the same. More muck, more nutrients, more blooms. It's like thanking the cleanup crew for cleaning up your living room while they sweep the mess into your basement. The question is, how long will it take you to realize the difference between trick and treatment? Here's another real-world example. I'm not going to show you the actual lake, but you'll get the point. There's a 150-acre lake that was treated monthly with algaecide, starting in early May. By late June, hypoxia had started at 32 feet. But what does that really mean? Just reporting the depth at which hypoxia occurs doesn't tell you much. In this lake, it meant that about 15% of the water volume was hypoxic, and 30% of the lake bottom was covered in hypoxic water. And that 30% of the sediment surface area was ground zero for nutrient recycling to keep the problem going. So they kept treating with more algaecide to keep the algae from being visible at the surface. By early August, just 6 weeks later, that hypoxic layer had crept up to 15 feet. That meant the volume of hypoxic water had tripled to 45%, and more than 60% of the lake bed was covered by hypoxic water. Selling all that algaecide might be good business, but it's not good lake management. It's a quick, flashy trick on the surface, but slow motion sabotage underneath. And if you're not measuring oxygenation to that level of detail, you're having the wool pulled over your eyes. It's trick, not treatment. When you measure what really matters and understand what's going on beneath the surface, you can start to see what's really happening and why you need to break the cycle. So how do you actually measure dissolved oxygen? It's simpler than you think. All you need is a dissolved oxygen meter. Lower it into the water and take a reading at every foot from the surface all the way down to the bottom. Do this at the deepest part of the lake and repeat it every month. First, note at what depth the dissolved oxygen levels drop below 5 milligrams per litre. That's where the ecosystem begins to struggle. Then look for where it drops below 2.5 milligrams per litre. That's where hypoxia takes over. But those numbers alone are not enough. You need detailed bathymetric scans, underwater maps that show you the depth profile of the lake in 3D. This data lets you calculate how much of the water volume and how much of the lake bed surface area are affected by hypoxia. Only with that information can you calculate the volume of hypoxic water and the surface area of hypoxic sediment. So you know what you're dealing with, and you can begin to design a solution to fix it at source. And that data is a key input when we design RADOR oxygenation systems, not by taking off-the-shelf aeration system modules and cobbling them together, but by understanding the full story your lake is telling beneath the surface. We create 3D models of a lake and run various simulations so the system design can do what it needs to do under all conditions, any time of year. Think of it like a CT scan for your lake. Without it, you're just guessing where the damage is based on what you can see at the surface. So what does true oxygenation do? When you restore oxygen throughout the water column, a lot of good things happen. Phosphorus becomes locked in the sediment instead of leaching out into the water. Ammonia levels drop, making the water safe for fish. And cyanobacteria lose their competitive advantage because they can't dive down to the bottom for nutrients anymore because they aren't there. With oxygen restored, the food web recovers. Zooplankton populations come back. They consume the algae. Fish can return to deeper water. Nutrient recycling slows down. Nutrient clearance picks up. And the lake stops fueling its own decline. That's how you bring your lake back to life. It's not a quick fix. It's like healing a long neglected injury. But once oxygen returns, your lake starts breathing again. Before we wrap up, there's one more threat we need to talk about. One that we've noticed in a lot of lakes across the country in the past few years. Lakes naturally rely on seasonal turnover in the spring and fall to reset and reoxygenate. This mixing process brings oxygen down to the bottom and helps flush out hypoxia. But warmer winters are interfering with that process. Surface water doesn't get cold enough to trigger the turnover. Lakes that are 60 feet deep are sometimes only the top 30 feet or so are mixing, leaving the bottom layers hypoxic year after year. If your lake's over 15 feet deep, this matters a lot. It means your lake might not be getting that seasonal reset anymore, so the damage from hypoxia just keeps compounding, spring, summer, fall, and winter. I know this is a lot to absorb. Lakes are complex ecosystems, but the core principles are fairly simple and absolutely critical to understand. Oxygen tells the truth about your lake, and measuring it is the first step towards bringing it back to life. If you missed something, watch this video again. And if you want to dig deeper, download our free Simplify the Science ebook. There's a link below. In the next video, we'll show you how to measure sediment reduction, biodredging process, and shifts in phytoplankton populations, so you can get ahead of blooms before they happen. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Press the like button if you'd like YouTube to spread the word, and please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can bring our lakes and our lake lifestyle back to life.